Hey and welcome to Neverwinter with Aragon. So you may have heard that the Warlock Hellbringer, the damage dealer path, will be getting some significant updates with the next module, Module 30. This most likely coming sometime in November. Now in this video I did cover the initial changes that were proposed by the devs as to what they're exactly going to work on with regards to Warlock. So if you missed it, be sure to check it out, as they did cover all of these things along with some information on what they intend to change. But we now have more information, more comments from the devs as to what they're actually working on and what we can expect to change with the Warlock Hellbringer. Something to note is they will be updating the Soul Puppet to be a lot more impactful than it is right now. So first of all, QQ made a pretty massive post here, a lot of work into it on just reporting bugs, and we got a response from the devs with a bunch of comments on some of those abilities. So let's just quickly go through them and see what the devs have to say. So for example, Dark Spiral had some bugs there that they then claimed to have fixed. Arms of Hador, some issues with the visual effects, and they'll see if they can rework it. So you're not just going to have it like go on cooldown and basically do nothing. The Blades of Vanquished Armies, you're just going to have the tooltip updated a little bit. It was saying it deals physical damage when it actually deals like necrotic. And the magnitude was also incorrect, as it's actually 130 magnitude per hit. Hadar's Grasp is supposed to be like a dot power, but they might look at reworking it so that the initial hit is not considered dot, which would mean it can like trigger certain effects and abilities which consider this to be an encounter power, as they currently do not. Your Dread Theft, they'll look at the double trigger effect, and it is also pretty odd that it can trigger some at-will attacks. You can see the bugs reported here. Overall, it is a pretty weird ability where you cast this at a target and you're locked into that for 5 seconds and not being able to actually use any of your other abilities. The Brood of Hadar daily power is just getting a tooltip update, as it currently claims to deal a lot more magnitude than it actually does. It is actually supposed to only be 800 magnitude. Your Flames of Plegethos, it's a dot effect and will also not trigger other effects like with Hadar's Grasp and Flames of Empowerment. The tooltip is misleading, and yes, it's supposed to only buff up your powers and not your other abilities like say mount, power, or belt item. Some further comments: you have Dark One's Blessings, the tooltip will be fixed. It's actually 6 seconds rather than what it states at 10. And they mention with Hellish Rebuke, the reflective or retaliatory damage is often restricted from triggering effects like dot damage. And they thank him for the bug list, and they'll follow up on some more responses as time allows. Currently, this is not like the complete list, but we have some more information with like Hellfire Ring stated as an outlier. Its secondary effect creates an entity which is being treated like a dot right now, allowing it to trigger effects most persistent entities do not trigger, and they might change it so it no longer triggers various effects after its initial hit, which would also mean it might very well not trigger Soul Investiture on every hit, as that's what currently is the main use of this ability, giving you that significant boost to encounter power damage. They did also say that Soul Scorch will no longer provide Soul Sparks, and that every at-will will provide Soul Sparks now. It will be more clearly identified in the tooltips, and critical hits from powers will still provide Soul Sparks, but they'll be reviewing it. They did also say it's intended that your Soul Scorch does not trigger like No Pity No Mercy. And there was more comments on Hellish Rebuke. It's not going to be changing that the dot can grant you Soul Sparks, and they will be working on clearing up some Warlock powers to better identify how they trigger various effects, like Blades of Vanquished Armies is a 3-hit attack, and it's actually closer to how Path of the Blades works, where each hit can trigger certain effects, like each hit being considered an encounter power cast, and I don't think they'll change that, at least from what they say here, but just update the tooltip to clarify that. Currently, Hellfire Ring works the same. It's not actually considered a dot on each of its hits, and they might also keep it like that and just express more clearly in the tooltip, despite them saying they might change it so it can no longer trigger various effects after the initial hit. A little bit confusing here. He said this the day before then saying this. But let's jump to the big update to the Soul Puppet. There is some issues with it, like it despawning and having a targeting flaw. There are currently 2 mechanics that govern the lifespan. 20-second duration set upon creation, and then when it's healed, like when you summon a new soul puppet or try to, that 20 seconds is set back to 20. And there's a hidden kill tracker that stacks up to 20 and kills the soul puppet if it reaches 20. But that kill tracker is reset whenever you try to stack soul investiture. However, there's some bug with that kill tracker that it can sometimes like target your companion rather than your soul puppet, meaning you can experience it just disappearing for no apparent reason. But the big thing with the soul puppet is that the stats are going to be fixed in the sense that they will now simply inherit your player stats, and this will solve oddities with crit severity and combat advantage in particular. But to note, they will likely result in having to lower the defensive stats, since most damage dealers have sub 50% defense stats. This means that the soul puppet can now utilize like combat advantage, and this will lead to generally higher damage output. You can see what QQ says here in the way that it could potentially give you up to 8 to 15% extra damage versus what it currently was at only like 1 to 2% of your damage. He is definitely not in favor of that fact, and it does make sense since your soul puppet is just a random entity. You can't exactly control it. It's just like having another companion. It's just going to automatically deal damage for you, and so there's no real skill involved in that. And it also means it can be unpredictable. Depending on the content, the soul puppet could end up in a situation where it can't attack the target or just dies a lot and ends up, not being very consistent with its damage output. Not something to rely upon. And you end up in a messy situation of either balancing it to deal too much damage or too little damage. But we'll have to see what happens with that and all of the other changes we expect to see. There is also some issue with Hellfire Ring, along with your Flame Strike Drids and Screen Scale Bowman, which can cause issues with bosses and their animations. That should be getting fixed. On a last note, it was asked if they could bring back like older combat enchantments or at least update the current ones like Poison Thorn and Cursed Burn, and Brett did say it's on their internal to-do list. Doesn't mean they're actually doing anything about it, but at least they're aware of the pitiful state of those other combat enchantments. But overall, that is it for the information with regards to the devs and their work on Warlock. We will have to see what happens. Ultimately, Warlock is a pretty messy class with a lot of bugs, and you can't just go give this higher magnitude, and this, and expect it to be much more effective. Currently, there's a lot of options you just can't choose because a lot of things are bugged and just don't work properly. Out of all the classes, I would say Warlock is currently the most messy. Probably one of the reasons why it's pretty tricky to find the balance for it, and also for the devs to figure out what to actually do. I have a hunch it's probably going to end up a little bit overtuned, at least for the start, but I would recommend just expecting that and don't fall for the trap of like making a Warlock if you can't afford it. If you want a meta hop, that's totally fine, but don't complain when they go and nerf it in the name of balance, because yes, that's I guess what the devs do. They use the live server as active development, and we should all expect that at this point. It does kind of suck when somebody invests a lot into a class, but I wouldn't lose hope in a class. Just make sure that you keep leaving your feedback and letting the devs know that you're not happy with the current state of it. But even with Warlock in its current state, you can still complete all the content, just a bit slower. And that is not to say multi-target on Warlock is still very, very good. People will always come and claim Warlock doesn't need any updates just because it's very good in multi-target, or at least solid in multi-target. And I don't find that to be a good enough reason. It's gotta be good in single target too, or there's just so many boss fights where it just struggles. That's how it is right now. Ultimately, thanks for watching. A special thank you to all these channel members for your extra support. I will see you guys around. Goodbye for now.